folks, welcome back to the Biz World channel, the Sales World channel, the ENBC network, everywhere we're going to be today. And we're going to talk about something that's going to touch on a dear topic, but really something that everybody should listen to, at least, to get some insights, because this is a topic that affects everyone. If you're living, if you're working, it's gonna hit you sometimes. And I'll keep I'll keep it at that for now, because my guest is a professional certified coach and also owner of Conflux Retirement Coaching. She specializes in non-financial retirement life planning. 25 years plus, of sales and corporate sales leadership experience, and a tremendous experience. But things happen in life, and our guest will take us to her journey and what got her to this topic. And retirement is really a piece of life that we all need to be aware of, and we need to plan for, and we need to understand it, because it does pose a very big question mark in our lives, because how do we do it? And a lot of us don't even think about it, or maybe we have the conventional approach to it, hey, let's do it for one, whatever, stuff like that. But there's a lot of ways to do it, and sometimes you think you're going right and things happen. But anyways, we'll cover all that with our guest today, Wendy Leggett. Wendy, welcome to the show.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me, Hurricane.
Oh, well, it's a pleasure. But so let's do the same, as always do. Let's start with your story, because you do have a very interesting story of loyalty, I would say, of good hard work, and the whole thing. But things happen in the corporate world, and anyone that's worked for someone or for a company can, or may relate to your story. Especially if you work for a company long enough, things happen, and it's sometimes unpredictable. Sometimes you can, think about it, in a way, but it is always something that can impact people's lives. Now you've got, a nice life, experience with all this. So let's start there, like, your career path, and your success in sales leadership, and how you went all from there. And 25 years later, things happen that you can share with us here today.
Oh, yeah, no, it's my pleasure. And thanks for the opportunity. And maybe the path that I share will resonate for some, or maybe you can still, listeners, just kind of relate it to things that have happened in your life as well. But as you brought up, I have quite a storied career in sales leadership. I started out really when I was in high school in retail sales. I worked at Nordstrom and several boutiques. And so I really was able to have that foundation around serving the customer and really putting that customer's needs in the forefront. And so then I springboarded from there, went into outside sales, lots of different companies that I worked for, from Fortune 50 to franchises to even, I was mentioning, to Knott's Berry Farm in outside sales. But the last position that I was in, and the one that you were speaking about, was I was a director of several franchises, that leadership role. And there were so many things about that kind of position that I loved. I loved connecting with the clients and having that win-win proposition. I really loved being able to help elevate my team members' capabilities and help them get on that trajectory of upward mobility. And I really enjoyed meeting and exceeding numbers. So it was just a really great triad of things for me. But that last position I had, we were doing really well. The owners of the franchises, I really loved them. So creative, kind of risk takers. We did a lot of things in the market really well. And so we were really expanding our reach and really driving some great profits. But that was probably the kiss of death, because then it made them very ready for sale. And so I think they just couldn't pass up that opportunity, because it was that moment in the sun for them. The new owner came in with a very, very different philosophy. So whereas we were really serving the clients and really, like I said, having this cohesive team, he had a very different approach to the market. And I know for myself, and this probably lands for everyone too, we know that when our values and our philosophies are clashing with someone else's, that sometimes it's very hard to move forward authentically, or feeling like you're really, in alignment with what is important to you. And that's what was happening. So, how I was having to show up for clients wasn't what I was used to. We were really disappointing people. We weren't really valuing the individuals that were working for us in the way that I felt was really important. And as much as I tried, because I think we're all problem solvers sometimes, and we think, oh, I can fix this. I stayed way longer than I should have, trying to find pathways to make this work. But ultimately came to that point where it was just soul sucking. I just couldn't continue to face clients and face my employees, carrying a philosophy that was very much in conflict with what was important to me. So I was at that crossroads, and that's kind of like what happens with retirement too. We're at this crossroads where, do I move forward and maybe continue in a career that isn't resonating? Do I make a shift? Do I retire? For me, I love working, and it wasn't a matter of ever thinking about retiring at that point. It was really more, where do I go from here? And I decided, rather than finding another position, that I was going to make a big pivot. And so I researched things. I discovered coaching, which was new to me. I'd worked with consultants a lot, but not coaches. And I found out, wow, I could go back to school and become a coach. So that was a big shift for me too. I hadn't been in school for a long time. So having that beginner's mindset and that vulnerability was really kind of intriguing and out of my comfort zone. But then I did achieve my professional certified coaching credential, and then dug even deeper and got several additional certifications around retirement life planning, what's called positive intelligence, and navigating transitions. So I said a lot. I'll stop there because maybe it brings up some questions, but that was my path.
Well, there's quite a bit there, of course, and actually, I'm going to dissect some of it. And first of all, I mean, I'd love the diversified portfolio there, and especially in sales. I mean, anybody that's been in sales, you appreciate salespeople out there, and what they do, and of course, we appreciate everybody. But we know there's a special, I guess, identity to sales folks, and just where I guess cut differently, and as you
Yeah,
said,
what charges us up.
yeah, it's a little different. I mean, not everybody, it's not meant for everyone. Although everybody is a salesperson by default. I mean, we always say that, and because everybody has sold something, an idea or a thought, or whatever, a
So,
request to some to their loved ones and things like that. But we talk about professional
yeah,
sales. It gets a little bit heavier, because you did mention keywords like targets, goals, and meeting numbers and exceeding numbers, and that's another language that comes along with the profession of being in the sales world, especially. And again, you mentioned leadership, and that's even more, because that's where you are kind of responsible for a lot of stuff. Not only the growth of a company, but also the people that work for you, your employees, your staff, your line, your forces, right? Your soldiers, your troops, and so there's a lot that goes in there. And so you've done quite a bit of a diversified portfolio, but then you kind of went into this company, and you mentioned franchise. Now, the word of franchising is a little bit interesting. I mean, I've dabbled with some franchise myself.
yeah,
There was even a time where we had a loss with a franchise, and that's a different story. But a franchise, again, I didn't ask which franchise it was, and what kind of business or industry you were in. But I mean, franchise can be a little complex, and there's a lot of stuff that goes on, because once you have that model, the new owners, I guess, with the franchisees, that's your clients and at first, and then of course they have to build and develop and see some positive outcomes, coming up in their work. So it's pretty good. But now you stayed with that company for many years. I mean, I believe, was it 25 years?
not with that company.
Oh, no,
That
with that.
company I was with for maybe 4 years, because the owners, I was with them for about three, and then they sold. And so then I stayed with the new owner for probably 9 months, maybe shy of a year. So yeah,
Well, what's also, let's talk about that. I mean, so first of all, I mean, obviously, people, they do the work. I mean, there's an opportunity, there's a business. There's a small group of people that kind of start building this business, and eventually the business grows, which is what happens. And that's actually the purpose of putting a business together, is eventually to grow it to a point where it becomes big, and
yeah,
profitable, and so on and so forth. But there is this cloud that always kind of stays, hovering around in the business world, that, when you get big enough, you become, attractive to bigger, folks. And, maybe, again, it could be also just a planning piece. I mean, sometimes people start a business, they want to grow it to a certain level and scale it to a certain point. And then when it's really hot enough, they're willing to sell. And a lot of people do that. They build businesses to sell them
Sure.
for, for a good profit margin. And that's a good, concept in business. But there is an impact, because again, as you said, philosophies can shift from one mind to another. The leadership shifts, the vision shifts, all the stuff, the strategy changes. The impact also is tremendous on not only the employees but also the customers, because the philosophies, change. And by the way, I've seen that, and I, like I mentioned, like I've dabbled with some franchises. There are, like, we've seen that also when franchises are starting, they do things always correctly. I mean, they do the best, and they have this, and they stay on point. But there's a point where they get a little excited, and that's a fact. And when they get to that hectic point, and they start seeing themselves, they start shifting things, and they want more. I think that's when they start making mistakes. And whether ownership remains or changes, sometimes that's what it is. You get to that level, like, hey, what else can we do? How can we make it more profitable? And you start looking, but then the concept starts getting a little funky, and the people,
Yeah.
the owners of the franchisees, sometimes they feel that because they're not really, because there's only so much you can do with a franchise too, like in terms of the businesses, whatever that may be. It could be food, it could be stuff. There's a limit of how many clients you can have, or, like, let's say it depends, like I'm referring, for example, to a franchise of fitness, right? There's only so many members you can have in a studio, right? At a certain
Mm.
point. So it kind of changes things. And yeah, you can have multiple locations and stuff, but it makes it very difficult. But now let's talk about the challenge, which is, the philosophy shift, or the change, when some, corporate entity takes over, or somebody, like the ownership is changing. There's always an impact. And obviously, by the way, that's also for leadership. I mean, a new manager comes in, is a new sheriff in town, right?
Sure.
It's the
Yes.
same concept here. Now,
Yeah.
you would always, like, well, this is true fact. I mean, I've been in corporate for 30 plus years, and I can tell you, whenever there's a shift in leadership, there's always that wondering, like, what the hell's going on now? How are we going
Yeah.
to operate? Is my job safe? Is the culture going to change? And all these things, become a problematic or questionable things. Now, obviously, some changes are great, and people love the new leadership, and they take
Yeah.
those companies to a different height. But sometimes you get a new leadership that maybe it's a corporate structure that is somewhere remote. They do it differently in whatever they come from. I mean, let's say, for example, in my world of insurance, you get a lot of small plans, carriers that start in an area, for example, New York, and then you get a huge, national that takes over that plan, right? And so,
Yeah.
the way national is run and the way local plans, for example, run, are two different, breeds. I mean, of
Yeah.
of
Very different
operation.
animals. Yeah.
One is more of a personable, family oriented. We cherish everybody. The employees have family and stuff, and that's kind of like how it starts, and which is a good philosophy. Good, but then you get into the real corporate. That's not how
Yes.
we do it. Everybody is, in operating differently. It's all
Kind of
systematic. Yeah,
depersonalized.
too
Mhm.
many layers of protocols, too many policies, and everything is done a certain way, and we can't deviate. So it becomes a little bit more challenging. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But there's always an impact on the staff, the leadership that is running.
Sure. Yeah.
Like,
It's inherent in change for
so
sure.
let's talk just briefly about that experience. I mean, I know you stayed 9 months in that particular, so you talked about philosophy, but what are, like, some of the things that really didn't vibe? I mean, that things that you thought that shouldn't have changed, for example, in just your
Yeah.
opinion.
Well, I mean, so far as even just serving the clients and how we approached it, because they were used to a certain level of service, professionalism, timeliness, even price. And there was a lot of waffling there. There wasn't that transparency that we'd had before, or there wasn't that same connection, or I don't know if I want to call it loyalty, but just that mutual respect of people. So it was really more driven just by the numbers and driven by the outcome, but not that quality of service, and not that connection with the clients. And so, on a short term basis, you can raise your rates, and you can, because people contractually have committed to it. maybe unknowingly, you're going to get the business, but you're not going to sustain the business. And so that's what was happening, is that these long-standing clients, and granted, I hadn't been at the company for more than 3 or so years, but I developed really solid relationships. And that's what we in sales do. It is about the connection. It is about the follow through and the under promising, over delivering. I mean, that's what sets you apart. And so those differentiators were not being delivered on. And then, so far as the employees, I mean, people were really not being valued. And so they were being pushed to do things that they hadn't had to do before, but not in a way that was reasonable or respectful. And we were losing a lot of our employees. And because of that, then we weren't able also then to serve the clients. And so there was that piece of it. But even other vendors that we had worked with, because, you know, you've got those relationships too with vendors, that wasn't being honored. So it was just a very different approach. It was a really cut and dry, down to the numbers, cutting things wherever possible. And that wasn't the model that the franchises were built upon, and it certainly wasn't the model that the franchises that I supported have been built upon. So it was, as you know, being in sales, you're the face of the company, and you're there in front of the clients and in front of your employees. And when you're carrying a message that you don't feel good about, in fact, you feel the opposite about, it's a very difficult thing to face people. It became very inauthentic feeling. It became icky, you know. I don't know a better word to say, that it just was, you know, I was no longer feeling motivated to go out and see people. I was having to kind of feel like I had to pull myself back. And we don't want to come from a point that we're not, of strength and of empowerment and of bringing our best self forward. So all of those things kind of conspired. And as I shared, I did really try to make this work. I had very lengthy conversations with the ownership. I would try to come up with collaborative ideas or compromises and things, but it just wasn't coming together, and the clients were being very, very disappointed and disenchanted with us. So, you know, at that point, I had to make a decision.
Well, so thank you. And I just want to touch on that. I mean, especially in the world of franchises, right? You know, you're right. I mean, you have contractual agreements, you have a period of time that you can't do anything about, you know, whatever the franchise, you know, corporation says you have
Sure.
to do.
Yeah,
Now,
there's a model to
yeah,
follow.
and so if they start changing things, you're kind of caught up into that, you know, legal agreement, and sometimes, you know, obviously for retention purposes, the minute your 5 years whatever is up, you know, you're like, oh, that's sayonara, I'm gonna change, you know, everything to my name, and that's it, I'm out, you know, and that's the thing. But I've seen that same, you know, concept again in my experience, where the company gets big, and you know, now they're like changing the way they do things, and you're right, it impacts the vendors. For example, if you're using a specific vendor and there's different ways to operate with them, and now you have these specific vendors that they want you to go to, they're not giving the same quality or the same service, the same pricing, you know, points, whatever. These things can be all, you know, detrimental to the people, because again, for a franchisee, when they invest, for example, they kind of figure out what it's going to cost them, and then they get comfortable with that formula, and now they have enough profit margins to make it. But now you start changing things, and now things become more costly. It's not like that they change everything. I mean, the rates are going up, whatever, and everything else, but their profit may not be as well. So now they get an impact. It can be a
Yeah,
problem. You're right. You know, when you as a leader, as sales, and I love what you said, we are the face. When you're in sales, you're the front line. I mean, you're the first
yeah,
line of defense. I mean, people don't get it. Yes, we are the first ones to actually, you know, approach people to get them into the business world, like to the corporations or to the businesses, whatever. But we
yeah,
also are the first customer, because what, you know, we have this rule. I mean, I used to do this, you know, in my trainings, and I say it like when especially when people are being trained just initially in sales, I tell them, like, you are the one that's going to bring that enrollment or membership or contract, whatever, that customer and client, but you're also going to be the, you know, the one that's going to maintain them and be with them and retain them, and you know, touch
yeah,
base. I mean, and we know there's rules about, you know, sales. You follow up with your customers, you make sure that you know, they touch points, you know, at certain time, you know, the next couple of days, a month later, 3 months, whatever, depends on the business you're in. But you have
yeah. But
different
you have
ways.
process. You have that process.
And people will always go like, "Okay, what the hell's going on? You ate. I mean, you signed me up for this. What's going on?" And
Yes.
you're right. If you also are not buying into the structure or the philosophy, it is
Yeah.
very difficult for you to present things that you're not really sold on yourself, and you kind of like just shove that stuff, and you know it's not authentic, as you said. You know it's kind of like not borderline not ethical, because you know that's not really making sense, but you have no choice. It's the job. Your job is on the line now. So you don't do it now. It's your your
Yeah,
seat
so
is at
you're kind of caught in that middle, right? You're like not making anybody happy, especially yourself. And so that's where it's, and I think in some ways I kind of liken that then to our journey into retirement is then being that leader of you, that CEO of you, I call it, and taking that accountability for the decisions that you make and standing by that and seeing that your values are in alignment with your actions. And so it's, I think it's just an important lesson for us at any age or life stage is to really recognize if things are out of alignment, stopping and doing some soul searching and saying, well, I'm the CEO of my life. I might not be the CEO of the company, but I'm the CEO of me. And so, how am I going to then move forward in a way that does align with my values and does feel like I can be authentic and bring my best self forward?
I want to just highlight, a point that you mentioned there. Actually, it's a fact, folks. I mean, if you're watching or listening, and I don't care who you are, where you are, what you do for a living, this is a true fact that I kind of figured out over the years, that you never work for anybody. You're always working for yourself. So you are
Mhm.
really your CEO. You are you Inc. And yes, and so like this is an analogy I used to tell people, like in trainings, like especially in sales. I mean, to get them to see the value of what they do and who they are. I mean, by the way, that goes for everyone that's watching or listening. It doesn't matter if you're sales or not. You are in control at the end of the day. You always look at it this way: you're bringing the talent, to a company. The company is providing the product, the services, the operations, whatever. But you are, running your own business. Like, you are the corporation of you running your show and using the services that are available through the corporation that you affiliate with,
Mhm.
right? They're basically your business partner, and that's how it
Yeah.
is. And sometimes, that business relationship doesn't work and you depart, or sometimes you're forced to depart, but it doesn't matter. You're still in charge. I think that's one way to look at it. And if you do it, in this kind of mindset, approach that I just mentioned, you're
Yeah.
always going to know that you have the final decision on everything. Things don't work out, you don't like it. Now, I'm not saying, guys, just every time you like, things don't work out, you're like, well, I'm just going to walk away. No, I mean, that you're not going to be running a good CEO business operation. I mean, CEOs do face a lot of stuff, that challenges, and life has challenges. But it's more about decision making. It's more about how you approach it. You are always in business for yourself. The company is providing you the finances, to run your operation, your Inc., and that's
Mhm.
your salary, if you want to call it, your commissions, whatever, or combination of compensation. But and they provide you with the tools, right? But at the end of the day, as you said, if your philosophy does not meet anymore, or the philosophy of whoever you partner with does not meet your philosophy to run, then you have choices. And by the way, that's before retirement. Now, obviously,
Yeah.
that's part. And I think we can segue to the idea of, the concept of retirement. Now, retirement is also a big point of discussion, and that's what we're gonna, focus now on, because here's the thing, folks. It is happening. Doesn't matter when you start working. You're gonna have to have an exit strategy, and that could be early on. Listen, I mean, it's a true joke. I've managed to retire 3 times, and I'm still back in business. Every decade, I'm like, this is it. I'm gonna, like I had that philosophy, like that dream, like, I want to read. At 30, I want to retire, or at least have a good
Yes.
financial setting that I can do it. And I actually did it, for a couple of years, and then okay, not enough. I still got the energy. I want to do this. And I go back, and then I try to do it like, where I have a parent living, where I can do this and still have enough to live on. And, there's a lot of challenges with that, folks. So it's not as easy as it sounds, like, hey, I can retire early. And the other thing, like, you see this. I see a lot of people working at a very advanced age, not because they don't have the means, they just cannot stop working. I mean, I
Yeah.
have great friends, who've made great living, and they have retired physically from a job, but they still work every day. They do consulting, they do different things. They're always busy. I mean, because you
Yeah.
got to keep alive, and so there is that concept. But the economies can be difficult, and a job can, for example, disappear. I mean, industries can disappear. We have technology now. We have AI. There's a big risk. In some areas, there's potential, changes of how things are going to be done. All right, and so a lot of people have to be smart about what would be my next move if I have to do this? Now, you start, especially the younger folks that are just starting their paths, right? They see retirement so far out. It's going to move quick, folks. I mean, I can tell you that much. Before you know it, you're like 20, 30, 40 years in the business working. I'm like, what the hell
Yeah.
just happened? And it's going to move eventually fast. And you'll find yourself sometimes in the same, position. You're still just making that paycheck to paycheck concept. You may not have anything to fall back on, no investments, whatever. What that's going to look like. It's very difficult. And I also have seen people actually who are struggling at a later age to make ends meet, and they're just working, these potential not attractive jobs, and for their health and stuff, and they still do these things because they have no choice. So there's a big dilemma there. So we're going to get into that deep dive, but just before that, I want to just to highlight something that you've done that is excellent, that I always kind of admire when people do this, which is that shift. You know what, you learn a new skill, you learn something new, and uh, um, it's never too late. You took it
Mhm.
back and you went back to school, you got certifications, you shifted a gear, towards a different opportunity that opened up a lot for you, and you've been doing that. And so that's the other thing, folks. Don't give up. Don't think that there's a end of the dead end opportunity. The dead ends are there. I mean, but you can move out and move to the next alley and move to the next one and find another way. There's a lot of ways,
Yes.
and it's never too late to do that. So I
Yeah.
always like to highlight that when I hear this, just to give people the motivation, that no matter what happens, you can always start again. There's always other things you can shift. It's not like, oh my God. I mean, I get it. We get comfortable in our, play, and we're good. We do the same thing over and over. It's coming into cruise control. Sometimes you have to get out of the cruise control and start, taking the leadership
Well,
yourself
that's where
as
the
well.
growth happens, right? When we're a little uncomfortable, that's where we then push the envelope a little bit. And then that's when great things can really happen. And you're bringing up that idea of pivot. And I think it is important that we're constantly looking at the possibilities, because if we stick with that one path, it may well be that we're really missing out on some things. And yes, it's comfortable and it's tried and true, but then we become more that tourist in our life rather than that explorer. We kind of start to check the boxes off, or like you said, on autopilot, rather than saying, hey, this is my one precious life. And so what do I really want to make of it? I think too, and you brought up when people think about retiring, and there is that move afoot, fire, financially independent, retire early, that a lot of people aspire to early on. And what I really like to always ask is, how do you define retirement? When people think about retiring, are they thinking about leaving career and leaving the pressures of career and just being an adventurer? Are they thinking about then having, becoming an entrepreneur and starting their own business? So is that retired? Are they thinking of then, going all out volunteering for a nonprofit? Is that retired? Like, how do you really define retirement? And so that's what I really challenge people first and foremost, because I don't advocate to retire, but I do advocate don't abdicate the opportunity, make the most of it. And so if you're saying, I want to leave career, like you were saying, Gal, I've tried several times, what was the impetus for that? What was your motivation? What did you see for yourself beyond? And so often people don't have a vision except to say, I just want to get out of the rat race. So let's really live where we are and say, okay, what can I do to make this more of this? Or like I did, how can I move in another direction? Or say, yeah, I want to be not working any longer. I don't, like you shared, there are people that are still contributing and doing all kinds of things. Define that for ourselves. But we know that human beings, we need to feel a sense of purpose. We need to feel like our lives matter. We need to feel like we're contributing, if not just to ourselves, then to others in our family, in our community, in our world. We want to make a difference. And so when we think about retiring, we don't want to retire all those aspirations. We don't want to just say, oh, now it's a downward slope. And so I think that's important, because purpose is baked into our work. It's baked into our careers. We don't really even think about it. But when we leave work, we can feel like we're leaving pieces of ourselves behind. And oftentimes that's because we don't have a vision, or we think that we're starting over. we're not starting over. It's a new chapter in that book of life, but we're bringing so many skills, capabilities, passions with us into that next chapter. So let's bring those, let's be aware of all those strengths. And then at the same time, the autopilots, let's notice what's the baggage, patterns, habits we want to leave behind and let those go as well. So those are some of the first steps that I take with clients as we navigate retirement. But to your point, it applies at any age or life stage, really.
Well, thank you. It's funny because I think you really hit it right there because you're right. Even for me, when the idea of like, let me retire early, it was just it's almost like it's just a philosophy, right? It's something that
Or a trophy, like,
yeah,
whoa,
yeah, 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 I
what
could
I
do this,
did.
right? Yeah, well, I think we have that, and we see that more today than ever with the social media, the opportunities to, for example, influencing, and making money online and doing all kinds of stuff. So there's a
Yeah,
lot of ways. I mean, obviously, back in the days it was more difficult. Now you can probably do it. I mean, with e-commerce, with the .com, era, things started shifting a little bit, and people have become a lot
more options,
more
more
options, more
fluid.
options and fluid, and they had the ability to do more early on and really bank a nice little portfolio, and therefore they could afford to kind of just sit back, relax, and enjoy the ride. But then that's the question, like, what does that really mean? Because there's retirement, which is basically I'm stopping everything, I just want to live, and enjoy life. And there's retirement, I'm just not going to do the job, but I'm just going to be enjoying my life and still doing things. And I think that's kind of like what it is it like, I love what you said, like you have to define it, we have to define it for ourselves. And personally, I can just, again, for me, what I found, it's not that I wanted to just stop. I can't stop. I mean, that's just me, I do all kind of stuff, but
Yeah,
but it was more the idea that I don't have to rely on one particular thing or like a source of income and stuff, that I can switch on and off whenever I want, that I can actually do
that
what I want.
control, that
Yeah,
autonomy.
travel. And one of the things that triggered that, just for our audiences, and it's a fact of life, I think, that we all have to be aware of, and I say this all the time, which is the only certain thing in life is death. And actually, I mean it, because I've seen it, I've heard it from people, I've actually experienced it, with close people that work with me, where today is retirement and today is no longer in this world, for example, right? And so that's the thing, like that's why the idea of retiring early is or like being able to live a life sooner than later. And because a lot of people think, well, I want to do all that when I retire, like the bucket list, I'm going to do that when I'm way up there. But no
Yeah,
one, first of all, no one guarantees how far up there we're going to go. Two, even when you get there, you don't know if your health is going to be sustainable to do all the stuff that you want to do. So the idea of retirement, at least for me, I'm not talking, some people hear retirement financials, I'm talking about just the picture, is that you want to be able to do things at early ages where you can discover the world. There's a lot of stuff to do out there, right? And travel around, see things, experience things. The bucket list should be today, not tomorrow. And you
yes,
ongoing, right? And actually, I had a show literally with the guy that's called the bucket list guy, and that's exactly his concept. Is that it's not later, it's now. You start the list, you do things every day, every month, you have things new you achieve,
exactly.
and you make
Yes,
it. And that's not the financial part. Of course, the question is like, how can I do that?
yeah.
If I am stuck in a 9 to 5 job, or I'm stuck in a
It, I,
in a
I think that's the thing, is that we get into these patterns and, like you said, autopilot, and we think, okay, 9 to 5. So in 9 to 5, there's no wiggle room. It's so black or white. And I'm going to say, you really challenge us and challenge our thinking that if it's that typical 8 to 5 and you have an hour for lunch. So what can you do in that hour? What can you do that half an hour before you start work, or that half an hour after? But peppering in these opportunities and experimenting and putting a toe in, and kind of just trying to change our mindset so that we're not thinking that it has to be black or white, that we're working or we're retired, but instead, and I speak about a runway to retirement, and really then building in these little experiments, because so often, hurricane people, when they retire, they say, "Oh, I'll get healthy when I'll retire. I'll travel when I'll do my bucket list then," and then they find that they don't have the momentum, or they don't have the mindset, or now they don't have the physicality, any number of things. But if they build that mindset all along the way and they build in that experimentation and that pivot and the possibility all along the way, then it's not one day you're in, the next day you're out. Instead, you've built this runway, this momentum. And so that's what I really speak to people about, is not leaving it until, oh, I'll lose weight, I'll get in the gym when I retire. Why can't you find a little time each day, like you said, and try those things? Because otherwise, too, it's just such a jolt to the system. It's almost like the light switch is on and then the light switch is off. And we do find that people do expire more quickly when they retire if they don't have a vision, if they don't have something that feels purposeful to them. And I'm not talking about that one purpose, because I think a lot of times that word is really overused and becomes overwhelming, so that it's like you have to find purpose. No, let's make it a verb, feeling purposeful and peppering in purpose with a small p, a large P, little opportunities along the way, so that we continuously separate ourselves from the purpose we feel at work with the purpose that we can feel as that CEO of ourselves. But it does take that accountability, and it does take that adaptability, and really making those choices, taking agency for our lives. And I think so often we get separated from that because we're following somebody else's model, i.e. the company that we're working for, and we abdicate that agency. So
So that goes back to the idea. As you said, you are the CEO. You can farm, you can refurbish, you can revamp, you can readdress any philosophy, any strategy for your life. I mean, that's like your business plan for life, right? So it's your plan, right? And
yeah,
really, I love what you said about like a runway, because it's a good a picture. I mean, I'm just imagining it's a long runway, and you're
yes,
getting ready to take off, and you do things, to get there. I mean, there's pre-flight checks, there's all kind of stuff that you have to do,
love
to
that.
actually
Yeah,
to go on the run, stuff like that, and it's an amazing concept. And again, I think it's a bigger picture than because when you hear the word retirement, you just hear financial. I think it's really what, yeah, and of course that's important. I mean, because
it is important for
nobody's
sure.
gonna give you a free handout, right? I mean, it's not
Yeah,
it's
no,
not an option.
it's part of our lives. Yeah, it's a foundational piece for sure. But at the same time, oftentimes too, people think that if they don't have a certain amount of money, then they can't be happy. And we know happiness and money, I mean, money will buy us a lot of things, but it doesn't ultimately buy us happiness. So even that mindset about our finances, I've had clients who have said, oh, my financial advisor says I can't retire, and they're really seeing the lack, the loss, the focusing on the negative. And I really explore with them their mindset. I had one client who was saying, I'm 71 now. When do I get to enjoy the fruits of my labor, is the way that he spoke about it. But my financial advisor says I can't retire. And I said, well, let's talk about that. You shared that you own this home, and you could sell your home and live more frugally. Oh no, I love my home. Well, what is it about the home? So we explore that. And you have these expensive habits. You loved it. I think they're like these small cars that he raced, very expensive habit. And I said, you could shift away from that habit or not keep buying more things. Oh, but I love that. So we kind of took it piece by piece. And what I'm trying to really share, Hurricane, is that by the end of that part of the conversation, he shifted his approach to seeing he was at choice. He was focusing so much on what he didn't have, and he wasn't recognizing what he did have and the gratitude that he has for living in this beautiful home and being able to be involved in these hobbies that he loved, with the connection he makes with people, etc. That's all around mindset. That's not around the money. That's really about looking at what we have in our lives rather than what we don't. And it's the same as we move into retirement. Are we looking at it as a time of growth and opportunity, or are we looking at it as a downward slope because we're with aging and loss? And so that's an area that I really focus on with clients, as well as their perspective and their mindset, and having that mental fitness, just like physical fitness, really moving their mind in a direction that's supportive of that growth and opportunity and pivot when needed.
Thank you, Wendy. And you're referring to the idea of the different misconceptions on retirement. I mean, because I think that's a perfect example. Like, while I'm thinking one way, that's just a misconception. That's not really. I'm already happy a certain way. Like, how do I do this? So can you define? Are there like defined, misconceptions about this concept of retirement? I mean, what are some of the key ones?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that opportunity because, first of all, I think people think that, well, if I have my financial house in order, then everything else will come up roses. And yet the studies tell us that 1 in 3 struggle in retirement. So that's a kind of a shock to people right there. Because if you think about people who have retired and you're to say to them, how's retirement going? Usually they're going to say it's great. And if they said it, they were struggling, I think the answer would be, you're crazy. You're so lucky to not be working. So there's a lot of shame and confusion attached when people are struggling. And I've had clients come to me, and right away, when I'm able to normalize it and say, you're not alone, there's confusion, there's stuckness, there's despair for some, there's feeling a sense of loss, but that's totally normal. And oftentimes it comes with not having this vision and also these misconceptions that everything's going to be perfect. So that's another area, is that people oftentimes go into retirement on one end of the spectrum or the other, either with this idealistic view that it's endless weekends, leisure, travel, or on the other end of the spectrum, pessimistic, aging, loss, 1 foot into the grave. And so we really want to then come into the middle and look at it with with realistic optimism. So we know what we're stepping into. We know that for some it can be a struggle, but we then really map out our vision. Another area that I think people aren't aware of is that on average, a retiree watches 47 hours of TV a week. And so they've basically then replaced a full-time job with a full-time job of watching TV. And that oftentimes happens because people, again, don't have something that they're looking forward to or recognizing what they can bring with them into retirement. So they start to live their life through reality TV or whatever they're seeing on the screen, and not stepping into taking that accountability and owning their choices. So that's an area that I think is really important for people to understand too, is that we know that if we're spending our time watching TV, that cognitively, physically, connection wise, emotionally, that's not going to be filling our soul or feeding our soul. Also, it's important to know that our mindset makes a difference. Dr. Becca Levy did a lot of research around the impact of purpose and the impact of positive mindset, and found that we can add 7.5 years to our lives by having this positive outlook around aging. So that's why I really promote this concept of a pro-aging. There's so much out there about anti-aging, all the cosmetics and the procedures to stave off aging. And so we can oftentimes be really disassociated from that getting older, but we know from the day we're born, we're getting older, it's going to happen. And so let's embrace it in a way that allows us to stay positive and stay open to the possibilities. So those are some of the things that I really want to raise up. Also, if we're talking about couples in retirement, retiring with a significant other, that we are seeing that there's a lot of disconnection in couples because they haven't communicated what they are looking forward to in retirement, or they don't have a vision, and then they're going separate paths. There's a lot of assumptions or expectations that haven't been voiced. So that's a really important area for people. And a misconception too is that, again, everything will work out. Things in our lives work out when we are an active planner, when we take a role in it. And I think oftentimes people think that there's no structure, routine, or framework in retirement beyond the financial piece, but we operate best when we have some kind of guardrails, and each of us is different in that way. Some are more flexible than others, but we still need to have some predictability and some roadmap in our life. And retirement doesn't tend to have the same kind of roadmap that other milestones in life do, like when we went from school to career, or when we went and bought a house, or we got married or had children. There's those templates, those roadmaps. The non-financial roadmap for retirement isn't one that people are very aware of. So I just shared a lot there.
Well, there's plenty. I mean, you beat me to the punch in some questions there, but really, I mean, you talked about the idea of yes, we get to this, age. And by the way, I love what you said about, a lot of propaganda about anti-aging, but very less about aging. I mean, and you're right. The minute we were born, we age. So that's sometimes I have this thing with my kids, like, what's the point of celebrating birthdays? I mean, really? I mean, we can debate that in a lot of different logical ways, but the
It's,
idea is, you're celebrating that you get older. That's all. Hey, I'm getting there. I mean, it's a good. I'm glad that I'm here today, right? So that's a good thing. But really, like, you're actually closer to that the grave, if you, I mean, to be like doom, base here. But the concept is, we have to be, I guess, sometimes logical, sometimes to be just straightforward with our minds, right? The mindset is everything in all this equation. I think that's really what can make or break someone, life,
great.
functions, because I think that's all there is. And by the way, mindset goes in everything, right? In personal life, in business world, in what we do, how we think of ourselves, and so on and so forth. And this is a part of life. I mean, you are here. You're gonna get. By the way, the lucky ones age. I mean, some people don't make it to that. That's the other thing, right? We don't guarantee that. So as you age, how do we age? I mean, I love what you said. Pre-planning. You got to plan. You plan that there is an infinite time, right? But you plan it with how you're going to do that. Your health is part of it, and again, health is wealth. We hear that. Your financials, because they can secure certain things, and your activities. What are you going to be doing? Let's say you have, and that's a great question. If you have time today, doesn't matter what age, what are you going to do? As you said, watch TV, be a couch potato and just, a couch potato rather, and just relax and not do anything, flip, channels. That gets boring over time. And actually, if anything, it's going to impact your health, as you said, cognitively, physically, everything's going to be. And we have that problem with gaming, and we've seen that also from a mental status and a physical status just in the pandemic era, where people were just locked down. I mean, some people got lucky and they had the ability to move about and stuff, but some people were crammed and couldn't do things. And you order things in. There's less mobility, so there's more physical and mental challenges that happen than not, right? So all
Yeah.
these things are like really piece. So I love the idea that yes, it's more about like what fulfills you. You have a purpose, and even when you actually are fully retired. And again, that question of what does that mean? Is it really the financial piece? Because I think that's really where we all got caught up, and we are still caught up, at early ages, or it doesn't matter what age we are. The idea is that we think that the sooner we can be set financially, the sooner we're cool. Like we got this. That's
Yeah.
just one part of it, and like you said, there's many other things. Like well, so you have the money in the world. I mean, you can be on yachts, you can have private jets, travel around the world. That also, it's lavish lifestyle, which is nothing wrong with that. But you can also get bored with that. Is that going to be fulfilled? You can have. Is it is a combination of all the above? Like let's say if you have all the money that you can spend. I mean, you're a billionaire, right? I mean, listen, we don't have to go far. I mean, we have Elon Musk, and I don't want to go politics, but he's got all the billions. He's the richest person in the world, but he's bored enough. He's got into politics now. So I mean, you got Trump. He is a president. I mean, so you can have all the money and still think like you want to do something else with your life and get involved in something. We don't know what that looks like for everyone. Some people are like, I don't want to do anything with politics. I just want to live my life. Go do charity work, right, and do good deeds, right. And so everybody's got a different approach to their life. But what
Yeah.
that looks like, sometimes we don't know. And I think there is a perception today, and I think it's more with the younger generation that, oh, you can make $1 million, online sleeping, or you can just, go do a couple of photos and videos, and voila, you just, things are going to be set. Maybe there's a percentage of people that succeed that way, folks, but that's not the reality. I mean, let's not fool ourselves. You know,
That's that idealistic view, right? That on that far end of the spectrum. And, I sometimes people say, what's the most amazing things your clients have done? And it's not that I'm shirking the answer, but I just say, that's not really what I want to promote, because I want to normalize things and say that whatever feels purposeful to you and meaningful to you and that you take accountability for, that's incredible. And that's what so every client that I work with, that's how I feel about what the path that they're on. It's not what they're doing, it's why they're doing it and the commitment that they have to themselves and to whatever that course is, and that ability to pivot when they want to, or not be so locked into that vision that they're not able to see other opportunities, or that if we have something like a pandemic, that then all of a sudden everything's lost. No, they have the mindset to pivot. They continue to see the possibilities. They continue to look at the opportunities. So I think that that's where, for any age, again, like you're saying, that idealistic view, or really that aspiration that doesn't have teeth behind it, let's really get real with what's important to us and what's realistic for us, and then move in that direction and be open to the pivots when they come up, or those opportunities that we could really miss out on because we're so narrow. And I think as we age, we can really start to feel like our life is getting more narrow, but it doesn't have to. That's all about mindset. You mentioned earlier, it's really thoughts. And our thoughts can dictate then our beliefs and our actions. So let's make sure that we're flooding our thoughts then with possibility and positivity.
Well, I love that. I mean, that message alone about positivity and just thinking, and that goes, for everything. I think if you have a positive outlook in life, things, and always be open to change and shift, and that there's different, again, you have to be malleable. We always say anything that's rigid breaks, right? And it shatters, right? Anything that's malleable can be maneuvered,
Yes,
right? And
yes,
manipulated. And
yes.
that's us. We got to be like the water and the wind, and just the elements, right?
Flow
Kind
in
of
it. Yeah,
flow, and those emotions can change things. And if you're like completely like locked into something, then you'll be disappointed because life is going to be throwing punches. And I think that's the other thing. With time and age, there's a little bit of wisdom that applies because you've seen quite a bit, you've
sure.
experienced things, and so like, well, there's you can never be like trusty, with this world. I mean, things will come at you when you least expect them, and sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad. And so the approach is, I love what you said about the why. It's not so much, it's the why you want to do it, and how you want to do that why, and you can plan it. The other thing that you talked about is the concept of doing the retirement with someone else, because I mean, a lot of people are couples, and
Yeah,
they age together, and how they do it, and they have to see a plan together. And it's not just the financials, because again, there's the health piece. Sometimes your partner may not be as healthy anymore, right? Or
yeah,
whatever the case may be. We see that all the time. Are you
sure.
gonna stay tuned, and you're gonna be tight with these people? You're like, okay, well, too bad, you're on your own.
Yeah,
Sayonara, bye bye. So there's a
yeah,
lot of things that happen there. Are you gonna get upset? If, let's say, the other thing is, like, again, a lot of people work, their average week, and they work paycheck to paycheck. Sadly, that's the state affair of many. And they're not ready to retire financially. I think that, so the burden of the finances is heavier on them, and so they're not seeing all the other stuff. I think they're caught just in that. I mean, like, it's like the loop that is not, ever ending, and they just stuck
yes.
with that concept. And so in your work, how can you turn someone from like thinking just that financial piece to like open up the horizon to everything else? That's just one piece that we can work on, but we can do stuff. And I love one of the things that you've talked about already is pivoting and maybe shifting the stuff to move from that loop, out of the loop.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, really focusing on, and I touched upon it earlier, like our values. So, what is important to us? What is meaningful to us? And so, if we know that family is important, or we know that learning is important, or we know that giving to others is important, those are all values. So, really having kind of our North Star, and recognizing what's important to us in that way. And then what feels purposeful to us. And I take clients through exercises that get at, when you were younger, what really lit you up? Or if nobody was watching, what would you do? Or if there was no risk to it, what might you step into? And so we really start to uncover and explore what feels purposeful and other avenues for it. We also look at the strengths of what we're bringing with us into retirement. We're not leaving all of those capabilities and skills behind. How might we transfer or translate those into our next steps? So, not doing the same work, but maybe if you've been somebody who had a large span of control and you loved mentoring people, then how might you transfer that into something else? Or if you really like the idea of giving and helping pull somebody else lot up in life, how might you make that happen? Or or things that got overlooked. So many of my clients say, gosh, I've lost contact with so many people in my life because of work. I didn't stay connected. And so really then trying to resurrect and rekindle some of those relationships. So all of those things we really explore so that we can start to get very clear on what we want to bring with us and have for us in our retirement, so that it isn't only the financial. Because if we go beyond the financial in any part of our life, even when we think about buying a house, yes, there's that financial piece. Of course, you have to know what your budget is, but then you walk into that prospective home and it's like, do I belong here? Does it feel good to me? Is it in a community that I love? Is it the layout something that I can relax in? Any number of things. It's the same with retirement. Yes, you need to have the financial piece, but that isn't all there is to it. And so really being able to explore that, that's what I do with clients, so that we're putting it in the proper perspective. We look at it as foundational, but just as I shared with that one client who was so focused on not, quote unquote, being able to retire because he couldn't afford it, then he could see, yeah, I could afford it, but not on my terms. And so let me really appreciate, because it is my terms. I'm choosing to stay in that house, choosing to keep that hobby. And so those are the kinds of things that we really just try to get really clear on, the gratitude and what we do have in our lives. Because oftentimes we're so focused on the goal or so focused on that end result or that outcome that we don't recognize the journey along the way. We don't recognize the piece parts that are moving us in that direction. So hopefully that wasn't too vague, but
Oh no, it's perfect. Well, I think one thing that I'm getting is that it's very simple for people who are watching and listening. This is an individual plan. This is not, a cookie cutter business. So everybody's going to have a different way of doing this. And I think the work
yes,
you do, you kind of guide them to figure out what that is,
their
uh,
way.
because as you said, I mean, think about it. It's what fulfills us, and sometimes we are attached to certain things, and that kind of has to be part of our retirement. So are we able to make and move with those things, or do we have to sacrifice things, to make ends meet? And there's a lot of ways to do this. I mean, sometimes people don't realize. I mean, we have, for example, a concept today of expats, right? People just, what? I can't afford to be in the States, but I can certainly live in an island or a different country as super rich, with the kind of retirement money that I'm going to make here, and have the
Yeah,
flexibility, the time, the health. So people have different choices and opportunities today that we might not have had back in the days. And maybe even then we had them, because again, as you said, it's still a choice of how we do it. I mean, sometimes, do we need everything we have? And that we've had all along. Sometimes you realize, like, I didn't need to. I mean, a lot of people that downgrade, from a big house to like a small little place. And I've seen that happening. Not because they can't afford it, they just don't need it anymore. I mean, kids are gone.
and
You
it's
know,
working against them almost. Having all
yeah,
that space, they're spending way more time keeping it up than yes. So it is just being having that agency, making those choices, being that CEO of you. That you called it CEO Inc. Didn't you, or you Inc.
you ain't.
Yeah,
Well, I think that we all have to adopt that concept. And again, I'm not forcing an ideology on anybody, but really, if you think about it, everybody matters to themselves before anything else. I mean, we're selfish by default in a way, because there's
yeah,
always number one, right? You look at yourself before you look at it. And by the way, it's not a bad thing. You always have to look
not a
healthy, be
bad
healthy,
thing.
to be able
Yeah,
to help your loved ones, right? If you're not taking care of you, you're not going to be able to take care of anybody else. I mean,
right.
how good can you be to others if you're not good to yourself, right? But that goes in. And again, this is not taking it out of context where, like, oh, I'm just me, myself, and I, and super
Yeah,
hyper,
yeah,
individualism. That's a whole different level. But really, we're talking about just being you, taking care of business, and knowing, that life. By the way, that's the other thing. Life is simple. I think we have also been conditioned to a lot of things that may be fluff. Yeah, listen, who doesn't want an extra car? Who doesn't want to have a beautiful, mansion? And but here's the thing: do you live in the whole mansion? I mean, yeah, you might be residing in the mansion, but you really live in a seat somewhere, or a couch, or a bed. That's all there is. I mean, you're not
yeah.
gonna bounce from bed to bed to, like, that's all. And even in a bed, I mean, even if it's a super California king size, you're gonna be literally taking about maybe 2 feet wide of that bed.
I love that. That's such a great.
But it's true, right? I mean, so it's how we look at it. And again, you can have 10 houses but you're only going to occupy one place in that house at a time. You can't be in 10 of them. You're not a clone. You can't, what do you call it? Bounce from one to the other. You can't teleport, right? So
Yeah.
these are things. It's how we look at things can make a difference. And sometimes when you dummy it down to yourself, you're like, okay, cool. I mean, you know what? I can do this. Listen, I used to camp. I love camping, right? And you can get as much life, living in a tent. I mean, and I'm not telling people, "Hey, we got to go to the woods now." But you know what? There are people that actually go to a cabin in the woods and they just live a nice little retirement, in nature. There's many ways to do this, but it's whatever fulfills you,
Yes.
folks. I mean, now you might be attached to everything that you have and you want more of it and you can't afford it. Why not? Or you can just, some people actually have people, I met people actually that sold their stuff and they're actually cruising around the world. That's all they do.
Yes.
They actually
Yeah.
live on boats, on ships, and they just transit in from one place, 6 months, 7 months. They have a small place that they call home. And then, but everything else is, in this, not only the discovering the world, they figured out the math. I mean, really, it costs them 5,000 to stay home. It costs them 3,000, at sea. So hello, I'm ahead of the game. I've
But
actually met.
they mapped out a plan and they took accountability for it, right? And they made those choices and then they're owning those choices and being accountable for them. And I think so often we do get on that autopilot track, and we just think, oh, everybody else has this because I'm seeing that out in the media or I'm seeing it in my life, so I have to have it too. I had one client that came to me. This hasn't happened too often, that wanted to work with me to map out her retirement, which was going to happen in a couple of years. And as we started talking, it became very clear to me she wasn't retiring on her terms. All her family members were putting so much pressure on her to retire. They had all retired early. And so they were really pushing that on her and she was buying into it. And so as we started to work together, she became very clear. She still loved her work, felt very gratified by it, was enjoying the income, felt that she had great balance in her life, was seeing her relatives as much as she wanted to, all of those things. And so then she wasn't abdicating the decision any longer. She was making sure that it was a decision she was making. And so I think that that's a really important thing for all of us. Same, like you mentioned earlier, that if people are young and they're wanting to retire, are you wanting to retire for reasons that are your why? Or are you wanting to retire because that's what you're seeing out there? And so that's what you should be aspiring to. When there's that disconnect there, we never feel, I don't think, as though we're really stepping into then our own lives and really living the life that we see for ourselves. We're living it based on someone else's terms. So
Well, thank you. So now here's a question that I think everybody's probably expecting on this show is like we hear this all the time, and it's more like it's on the financial piece of it. Is like, is there a number that I need to have to retire comfortably? I mean, I think you probably heard that one before, and I think that's the biggest question. That's like the elephant in the room question that we want to clear. Is there a number that makes sense for people or for all of us? I mean, to me, I think that the answer would be like probably not. I mean, everybody's different, but again, what is your sense of it? Because I think everybody's like, I need to have $1 million. I need to have $2 million. And again, there's inflation. There's like, I mean, today is not the same 30 years ago. I mean, people that retired 30 years ago are not the same people that's going to retire today or on 10 years from now. So
yeah.
life has changed and there's a lot of stuff. I mean, there's technology. So what is the magic? Is there, or maybe there's a formula to it that we all have to look at? How do you deal with that question?
Yeah, well, I don't get into the finances. I work with a lot of financial advisors and they refer clients to me and we collaborate together, but it really is, like you said, a very individual scenario. And it's really looking at the resources people have and what they're capable of still contributing to and what other streams of income they have, as well as where they want to live. It just takes into account a lot of things. And so I think what's important is that people do have a plan, and that from both a financial and non-financial standpoint, that they're mapping it out and they have that runway. So as early on as they can, they start to map it out. Not that we're then jumping into our future and not being present, because we want to live in the moment and be in our moments, but we want want to be planful as well. And so if we're saying that I want to maintain this same lifestyle that I have, then you can put pen to paper and determine, okay, what are those piece parts and what's it going to take? And then looking at, the actuary tables to know what typical lifespan is. That's what financial advisors are going to do. So you need to have those resources for X number of years to be able to support that wealth span along with that lifespan. And so I'm not trying to not give an answer, but it really is, there's so many variables and it's so individual. But what it all boils down to is being planful and being accountable and not leaving it to chance that, I'm retiring next year and I haven't given my finances any thoughts. Well, then how are you going to sustain the lifestyle if now you're shifting from, accumulation to distribution? And so those factors are important. So, yeah.
Well, I did expect an actual, number because there is, I don't think there is one. As you said, everybody's different. Depends on how you see yourself, whether you want to
Yes.
slow down on your pace or you want to just multiply, you want to do more, it changes. And I love what you said. You have to seek, that's a financial advice that is additional to the planning part. And I love your work is that really you just give the roadmap, the runway, as you said, to like what that looks like. Now that brings me to the question is how soon can someone start doing the planning? I mean, how early in their life can they do it? I mean, I'm assuming the earlier the better, but that's not what we see. People in a younger age, they don't have any, I'm not saying, I'm not generalizing, but typically they're distracted with all the good stuff that's happening that no one is planning that.
Sure.
So
Yes. Yeah.
what is a good time frame to start, kind of figure out what that looks like? Because for us, at any given age, we think it's still further out, it's still there.
Yes.
I'm
Yeah.
not there yet.
Yeah.
I'm not there yet. I'll get there. Like, when the kids, are we there yet? I think that question should be more relevant in this context. Are we there yet? Are we going to be there soon? What that
Yes.
looks like, because time
Yeah.
is going to, go fly by so fast. So what is, in your expertise, what that looks
Yeah.
like in terms of like when you
Yeah,
start?
that sweet spot for planning and that runway. Well, the runway, I think, hopefully, you and I together have been able to share with everybody why let's just pepper it in along the way and not wait to have it be a slash cut. But that sweet spot to work with someone like me or to really be mapping things out is kind of that 1 to 3 years before we retire. I have some clients that come to me sooner because they are more planful. I've also had clients that have come to me sooner and figured out, wow, I'm so excited about this. I have such a crystallized vision. I'm going to retire earlier and I'm going to leave career earlier. So that's very exciting too. And then for others that start to have that gratitude or start to see the possibility planted, blooming where they're planted. And so then waiting to retire. But that 1 to 3 years is a good sweet spot. For those that own their own businesses, though, and are transitioning out and want to do it over the course of time, then maybe we want to expand it to 5 years. But I'm just giving generalities. I work with people who are retiring in a month, and I work with people who've been retired for 8 years, and I mean everything and anything in between. So it's never too early, it's never too late, but it's as much as we can be mindful ahead of time, then we can just ensure that it's going to live up to all of the things that we've hoped and that we've worked so hard for it to be for ourselves.
Well, thank you, and I love it because I mean you do need time to figure all these things out. I mean, so you're right. But here again, I think when I hear you, maybe people will automatically think because I think we have a deadline of retirement. I think we've been conditioned to 65 being the date, but that's not really. I think what you're referring to. It's whatever that date is for you, right? Individually, correct?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I was doing a presentation. A gentleman came up afterwards and he said, I'm so excited about your work and I will work with you when I retire, but I'm not ready yet. And he was 92. So,
Yeah, but I was to say, like, it's because we've been conditioned like retirement is 65 because Medicare, at least in the States. Now, this is a
yeah.
worldwide show, so
Social
people retire
Security.
different. Yeah, I think that's really when we think about it. But really,
Yeah.
that's just one piece of your finances, and maybe health, benefit. But if you plan ahead, and you want to retire at 50, and you have the means to do so, and you can figure out a way, you could do it. I mean, so
Yeah.
that's when your retirement really begins. But what that looks like, I think, is what you actually help people with to structure. Now,
Yes.
how can people work with you? And how did I get to you?
Oh, yeah, thanks. Well, the name of my company, as you shared, is Conflux Retirement Coaching. That's CONFLUX. So you can go to my website, confluxretirementcoaching.com. I'm on LinkedIn, Wendy Leggett. I'm on Facebook as well. So you can connect with me that way. But I do offer a no regrets retirement reflection exercise. So maybe you'll be able to put that in the show notes. But that's kind of a reflection to go through and do a lot of the things you and I spoke about today. Start to really visualize what's that quote unquote perfect retirement and what could your days and weeks ahead look like. And then if you didn't have that abundance of time, what would be the priorities? And if your life was going to be cut short, what might you regret? Because now we have that opportunity to reverse engineer and look at, okay, what do I want to make sure that I do get to enjoy in this lifetime? So it's a really great exercise, and people can find that at www.boldnewsapps.com. But hopefully we can put it in the show notes. So, but I offer a complimentary discovery call, which is really a coaching session to really find out, discover what are your obstacles or opportunities. What's the challenge for you right now as you think about retirement? And we spend that time really exploring it so people walk away with something really tangible and actionable. And then they can decide if they want to work with me further. So,
I think your work is phenomenal.
thank you.
I think we all sometimes think we know what we want, but really sometimes we know what we want because we are stuck with what we have and how we've been doing things. You know, an
Yeah.
outlook from the outside is always better for us to see. Like well, maybe because we just know one way to do things. Maybe there's other ways to do this. So definitely we'll have those links in there. And folks, I mean, again, consultation is available. I love that whole exercise that you stated because I think that will play a big game on anybody that does that. Because what
Yeah.
if you start doing the what ifs and now you're like, ooh, I don't want to regret anything. I want to do things, So now you start thinking differently. Your approach to life becomes, and frankly, we've seen stories where people, had everything, but then they get hit with illness and everything shatters in split seconds that they can't, it's over, right? Or it's not over,
Yeah.
but it could be over to a certain point.
It changes their course anyway. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that needs to be part of our you know just horizon. It's not like you don't dismiss that possibility because you never know, right? So that
Yes.
exercise will definitely change people's minds about how they do it and whatever their time frames
Yeah.
are. They can be shifting that. And by the way, that's the thing, we can do that, we can change any moment, right? So we don't have to wait to figure things out. We have this opportunity, folks. We have an expert in front of us today. I truly recommend, please do go check out, do the homework, the exercise, reach out, let's see what's in for you. And you don't have to wait until you're 3 years before 65. You could do this whenever you think it's especially if the day's mentality is like, I want to retire sooner. Maybe let's figure
Yes.
out what that looks like. And, you do also have, you work with financial advisors. So maybe you have a connection there so they can do the actual dollar signs and dollar amounts and dollar formulas with you and equations. Because I think that all ties in. But at the end of the day, if you have a plan, part of the plan will be like what are those numbers that you're going to need to make and sustain, right? So I think you
Yes.
you can
Yeah.
get
To
them to the right
have
place.
that peace of mind around that or that roadmap so that you're mapping that out and you're not leaving it to chance. Because it all just gets back to the you Inc., taking that responsibility and not allowing life to dictate for you. I talk about a retirement by design, not default, and not just allowing life to take you on its course, because it will if we don't seize the course and set it for ourselves.
Whew, I love that design, not default. I mean, you're in charge. Right? Let's not do the cruise control thing, right? Well, so now we're at the end of the show here. Anything you want to leave our audiences with as final advice, to just get them pumped.
I think it just comes down to really setting your course and deciding, what this one precious wildlife that we have, what does that look like for you, and stepping into it. So again, at whatever age or life stage, is taking that accountability and not living a life that's been dictated to you because of others or because of society, but really recognizing this is your moment, be in the present and map out the things that are most important to you to get you to the future you're looking for. So.
Well, Wendy, thank you so much for a beautiful. We just over the hour, but who cares? I mean, it was fun. I enjoyed it, and it's pretty powerful stuff, folks. So thank you so much, Wendy, for being with us, for sharing the
Oh, it
insights,
was
and
so
and certainly,
fun. Yeah.
and certainly, I hope people connect with you and you can assist them. In their. I mean, it's this is life changing stuff, so it's an important piece of life, and you can contribute and participate in that. So that's beautiful. All right, folks, this is the end of the show. Hope you enjoyed this discussion and a lot of nice insights here. So hey, let's check out the site. Let's do the homework and see what's in for you. And by the way, it's not just for you. Maybe for someone that you know that's about to retire, or you know that they are not sure. That could be, it could be your parents. For who knows, right? That could be for
Absolutely.
someone else. So you could do that a gift, right? But anyways, so that's it. I'm Hurricane H. So we'll be talking soon. New day, new show, new topic. Bye for now.